Tina Williamson had no trouble meeting people.
She's outgoing, talk your ear off kind of person.
And the same was true of Jack Raines.
He was always a fun-loving guy, life of the party.
He liked to joke around.
So when the pair met, they soon became close friends, despite the 40-year difference in their ages.
If you saw them together, they might look like daughter and father.
They also became business partners.
They were selling and buying used cars.
But one September Saturday, their partnership came to a sudden and tragic end.
He was shot 5 times.
Was it a robbery gone bad?
Almost every drawer had been opened. Things had been thrown around.
Did the old man have enemies?
People that were down and out. He'd lend them money.
Or had Tina and Jack's partnership taken a surprising turn?
It was not strictly business.
Murfreesboro, Tennessee, September 1st, 2007. It was a late summer Saturday when 39-year-old Tina Williamson and her husband pulled up in front of a home in the suburban town, 40 minutes southeast of Nashville.
That area is kind of middle class. There are lots of nice homes.
Tina and her husband, who lived half an hour away in the tiny town of Woodbury, Tennessee, had come to Murfreesboro to check on Tina's close friend, 83-year-old Jack Raines.
She thought that Mr. Raines was just a part of the family.
She watched over him almost, and she cared about him a lot.
And she was worried about him, too.
They had made telephone calls to him on his cell, on his home line, and had never gotten a call back from him.
Which was unusual.
We were at least on the phone with him every day. We had contact.
And so they were going to go by and check on him.
Had her elderly friend fallen and been unable to call for help? Was he ill? Did he need medical help?
She knew in his age that there's a lot of stuff that could have happened. He could have gotten hurt or anything.
Once Tina and her husband arrived at Jack's door, worry turned to fear.
When they went over there, they couldn't get anybody to answer.
Tina and her husband did have a key, though, and when they let themselves in, what they found was disturbing.
The house was completely ransacked.
Almost every drawer had been opened. Things had been thrown around.
Tina headed for the bedroom, calling out for Jack, while her husband went through the house to the kitchen, totally unprepared for the gruesome discovery that awaited him.
That's where he found Mr. Raines.
Tina's elderly friend was at the kitchen table, slumped in his chair and covered with blood.
He had been shot in the back of the head.
He was clearly dead.
But why would someone murder the 83-year-old? Was it simply a robbery gone wrong? Or was it possible that Tina and her elderly friend shared a scandalous secret?
When I had heard the rumor, I was shocked.
Born in 1968, Tina grew up an hour and a half southeast of Nashville, in the small town of McMinnville, Tennessee.
My mom, Tina, was from Middle Tennessee. She stayed in the McMinnville and Woodbury area pretty much her whole life.
She was a happy, friendly child.
She's outgoing, very loud and talkative, talk your ear off kind of person.
And as a teenager, she proved popular with the boys, too.
She met my dad in high school at Riverdale.
The high school sweethearts became husband and wife in 1986.
She was still in high school when they got together and got married.
She was also still in high school when she got pregnant.
I think she was 17.
Tina dropped out of school and gave birth to a son. Daughter Jessica followed about 3 years later. But the pressures of raising a family proved too much for the young couple. And by 1990, when Tina was 22, her teenage marriage had ended in divorce.
We lived with my grandparents and my dad. We only saw her, on the weekends.
Mostly because Tina was struggling, working through a series of jobs.
She typically worked small jobs, waitressing.
Taking care of elderly people, just different jobs.
She didn't hold down a job for very long before moving on to another job.
But in 1992, while working at an auto parts plant, she met the man who would help turn her life around, Ron Williamson. 12 years older than Tina, Ron was a long-haul trucker with 2 young daughters from a previous marriage.
My dad was on the road working a lot.
And soon after they started dating, Tina moved into Ron's apartment and helped raise his little girls while he was away.
Tina came into my life earlier than I can even remember. All my childhood memories, she was right there. She took care of me, and she was like another mom to me.
The couple married in 1997 when Tina was 29 and bought a house in Woodbury, a small community outside Tina's hometown of McMinnville.
She lived in a nice house. She had a hard-working husband, and she was, by all intents and purposes, prosperous.
But just as things finally started looking up for Tina, she faced a new challenge.
A serious auto accident back in 2004 left her with serious back injuries.
She hydroplaned and just kind of went off the road and flipped her truck a few times, and it threw her out in the middle of tumbling.
Tina was lucky to be alive.
Her back was broken and they had to life flight her. It was awful.
But her life would never be the same.
After her accident, Tina wasn't able to do a lot of the things that she was used to.
The accident left Tina unable to drive. In fact, she could barely walk.
At first, she had to have a walker. She got to the point where she could walk without one.
However, she was never well enough to return to waiting tables or cleaning houses or any of the other jobs she'd often held.
She couldn't stand very long. She had to stop and take breaks and just rest.
The family did manage to get by, even with Tina unable to work.
She applied for and was receiving disability benefits.
But while the disability checks helped pay the bills, they did little to address Tina's boredom.
She hated just sitting around.
Not that she would be sitting around for long, thanks to General Jack Raines. Born in 1924 in Cannon County, Jack Raines had served his country and his community for many years.
Granddaddy, he spent time in the Air Force and then went to the Tennessee Highway Patrol.
However, General wasn't any sort of title or rank.
General was his first name. Jack was kind of like a nickname. Most people knew him by Jack.
By the time he met Tina in 2003, Jack was long retired, almost 80, and living alone.
His wife was in a nursing home here in Murfreesboro.
But Jack showed no signs of slowing down.
He liked to be around people and he liked to get out and do things.
He kind of come and went as he pleased.
And he was well known in the community.
We would eat in the mornings at Waffle House a lot, and he always knew all the waitresses and the waiters and the cooks and would talk to all of them. They knew him by name.
He was always a fun-loving guy, life of the party.
He liked to joke around and kid around.
And he liked to keep himself busy, too.
Granddaddy Jack was always doing something, buying and trading, selling guns and knives and whatever was his passion at that time.
Jack's love of trading was also how he met Tina. After talking guns with Jack at a few flea markets, Tina's husband invited the elderly gentleman home to see his gun collection and meet his wife.
They met whenever they were at the flea market in Woodbury.
But while Jack was always happy to talk trading with Tina's husband, he and Tina became even closer.
He looked at her as emotional support, I guess, as a friend.
And because of the accident that left her partially disabled, they had a lot in common, despite the more than 40-year difference in their ages.
Because she wasn't able to get out and do things that she wanted to, they understood each other. I guess that's sort of the equivalent of being older and not being able to get out and do what you want to. They bonded and they almost became like best friends.
They would just go do things together and help each other out.
And since Tina still couldn't drive, Jack acted as her chauffeur.
Mr. Raines would come by and pick her up.
And in addition to getting Tina out of the house, Jack also gave her something to do, helping out with one of his many trading ventures.
They were in the business of selling and buying used cars.
They would buy a car, and clean it up, fix it up, and then they would sell that car.
Mostly old junkers, the cars weren't moneymakers by any means.
They would flip it and make a couple $100.
But it did give the two friends something to do together.
They had a routine they'd go through. They'd take her to breakfast, and then they'd go buy a car.
And before long, Jack was more or less a member of Tina and Ron's family.
They invited him to have dinner and everything, and then that became kind of a weekly routine.
In fact, lots of people assumed Jack was family.
If you saw them together, they might look like daughter and father.
He came over for birthdays, for holidays.
She became a pretty good part of his life.
But in September of 2007, after 4 years of friendship, Jack Raines would suddenly be out of Tina's life forever. Coming up, the authorities investigate Jack's murder.
I believe that this was just a robbery gone bad.
And they uncover some surprising secrets in his past.
These were some tough characters.
It was late evening on September 1st, 2007, when the husband of 39-year-old Tina Williamson called 911 and reported that they had just found their elderly friend, General Jack Raines, dead in his Murfreesboro, Tennessee home.
They had not been able to get in contact with him. They went over to the house to try to discover what, if anything, was going on.
And as he explained to the 911 dispatcher, that was when they discovered that the 83-year-old Air Force veteran had been murdered.
Mr. Raines had been shot at the kitchen table.
He was shot 5 times in the back of the head.
Someone shot him 3 times in the back of the head from a distance, got closer and shot him another time, and then the final shot was a contact wound where the gun was placed to the back of his head.
And based on how he'd been killed sitting at his kitchen table, Jack had been caught completely unaware by his attacker.
There did not appear as if there was any kind of struggle.
But why would someone slip into the house and kill Jack?
According to the police, they initially believed that this was just a robbery gone bad.
Was someone targeting the neighborhood?
It was a nice little place, mostly retired people living in the neighborhood.
Or had they targeted Jack specifically? An angry buyer, perhaps?
Anybody that has dealings involving automobiles, you're going to have disgruntled folks.
Murdering Jack over a lemon might seem over the top, but whatever led to the shooting, there were a few things that immediately caught the investigators' attention.
One of the first things they noticed was there were no signs of forced entry.
But that wasn't all they noticed.
Almost every drawer had been opened, things had been thrown around, but there were a lot of items of value that were not taken.
Things like jewelry and electronics.
We've investigated so many burglaries, the items of value are the things that go first.
And that raised some serious questions about what had, at first, looked like a robbery gone bad.
My partner and I both suspected that it had been staged.
Suddenly, the investigators had a real mystery on their hands. And hoping for some answers, they turned to the first witnesses at the scene, Tina and her husband. Tina was fighting back tears when she spoke to the detectives.
She seemed distraught.
She really loved Mr. Raines because, he was a grandfatherly figure.
She had lost someone that she cared about, someone that she loved, and she had a very hard time just even getting the words out of her mouth.
Eventually, though, Tina was able to tell the detectives that she had last seen Jack the day before, when he drove into Woodbury on Friday, August 31st.
Mr. Raines had gone that morning to Woodbury, to her home, picked her up, then took her out to breakfast at a local fast food restaurant.
It was something they did almost every Friday, something Tina said she had always looked forward to, since a near-fatal car accident 3 years earlier had left her on disability and unable to drive.
She was at home a lot. She didn't really get out much.
After breakfast, according to Tina, they had run a couple of errands, and then Jack had dropped her off back at her home.
Tina Williamson said, when interviewed by police, that she had not been in Murfreesboro at all the day of August 31st, 2007.
But when she didn't hear from Jack the following Saturday morning, Tina said she had started to worry, and so had her husband, who was home for the weekend.
They thought it was odd that they hadn't heard from him.
But who might have had reason to kill Jack? Tina said she had no idea.
He was just such a great person.
And when the investigators followed up with Jack's family, they were just as mystified as Tina.
As far as who I thought may be responsible, I didn't have any idea at the time.
My grandfather was well liked, and there was no one that disliked him that I know of.
The following Sunday, while the detectives continued to conduct follow-up interviews with family and friends, Tina turned a picnic she'd been planning to have with Jack at the city park into an impromptu memorial service for her murdered friend.
She had a tribute to Mr. Raines, a little lunch out at the park, where she had his military pictures and all these things.
Jack's funeral on Wednesday was an even more elaborate affair, highlighting his long service to his country and community.
The Patriot Riders were there, and we had the color guard there.
And of course, Tina was there too.
She seemed pretty visibly upset.
She was very heartbroken, and she expressed to me, she said, I loved Mr. Raines.
By the time the community turned out at Jack's funeral to show their support for his grieving family and friends, the detectives had started piecing together a few things about Jack's murder. For starters, when Ron and Tina found the body on Saturday evening, Jack had been dead for more than 24 hours. The medical examiner estimated that he'd been killed late on Friday morning.
Somewhere between 11 o'clock and 12 o'clock on August the 31st, 2007.
The autopsy had also recovered the bullets from Jack's body.
Mr. Raines was killed with a .22 caliber pistol.
But the most intriguing thing was what the investigators had uncovered about Jack. Apparently, guns, knives, and used cars weren't all that he bought and sold.
He dealt in moonshine.
He didn't make it. Instead, he was more of a middleman, just like his other trading ventures.
He had lots of moonshine, and he sold it pretty regularly.
Making or selling unlicensed moonshine was illegal in Tennessee at the time. And as the investigators discovered, that wasn't the only questionable thing Jack had done to make money.
He did loan money to people.
People that were down and out. He'd lend them money.
And the interest would add up, often to many times the original loan.
He may lend somebody $400, and then every pay period he'd take $100. He was a loan shark.
Was it possible that someone who owed Jack money, or one of his moonshine customers, was behind his murder?
These were some tough characters. I said, goodness gracious, there's probably 1,000 people out there that could have done that, and or might wanted to do it.
Following up with Tina and her daughter, investigators uncovered what sounded like a promising lead.
Tina suggested that there was a guy that had a beef with Jack, and that he was the one truly responsible for his murder.
They'd been arguing back and forth for 2 or 3 weeks or something like that.
So why hadn't Tina mentioned it before? Grief, according to her stepdaughter.
I think she was in shock when all this happened, and she had a very hard time just even getting the words out of her mouth. It wasn't like she was trying to hide anything.
It may have taken a while for them to get it, but when the detectives followed up on the tip, a neighbor did say he'd seen someone fitting the man's description leaving Jack's house a day or two before the murder.
He went storming in the house, and all of a sudden, he just ran out.
Thanks to Tina and her daughter, had the investigators finally caught a break. Coming up, the investigators uncover a crucial clue.
Tina had made calls that were actually pinging off the cell phone tower nearest to the victim's home.
One that leads to a surprising discovery.
They saw her on the cameras walking down the road.
By September 6, 2007, it had been 5 days since 39-year-old Tina Williamson found her friend, 83-year-old Jack Raines, dead in his Murfreesboro, Tennessee home.
It looked like somebody had just came up behind him and shot him in the back of the head 5 times.
And thanks to a tip from Tina, the investigators had what appeared to be a promising lead on the killer.
There was someone that had a dispute with Mr. Raines. She believed that dispute was over money.
But would Tina's tip pan out when the sheriff's deputies took the suspect into custody?
Police fully questioned him, but determined that he had a solid alibi.
And with that, their promising lead evaporated.
There was absolutely no way that he could have committed the crime.
However, while the man who owed him money appeared to be a dead end, the killer might still be someone who had business dealings with Jack. Because when the investigators did a little background checking on his good friend and partner, Tina, they made a surprising discovery.
Tina had a lengthy criminal history. She was in trouble with the law quite a bit, from about her late teens to her early 30s.
Most of the trouble was minor stuff,
including such things as shoplifting and bad checks and that kind of thing.
But some of it wasn't.
She did spend 3 years in federal prison for credit card fraud.
And that left the investigators wondering, was it possible that Tina's history of fraud had something to do with Jack's death?
Tina and the victim had a business together where they would buy and sell used cars.
Was it possible that Tina was ripping off her business partner?
That money would go into a special account that Tina had access to.
In fact, as the investigators discovered, that wasn't the only joint account that Jack and Tina shared.
They also had a $100,000 CD.
A murdered man, $100,000 on the line, and a business partner with a history of fraud. It was more than enough to make the investigators take a closer look at Tina.
The big thing that pointed towards Tina was money.
On September 6th, the investigators asked Tina to come in to discuss her business relationship with Jack.
During the interview, she brings in her checkbook and other assorted papers.
In the interview, Tina repeated what she'd already told the investigators on Saturday morning after she found Jack's body, that she'd last seen Jack on Friday when he picked her up for breakfast.
They had a rather pleasant morning together, no different than many of the other mornings they spent together.
After breakfast and a few errands, Jack had gone home alone.
She stated that he had dropped her off at her home there in Woodbury.
And according to Tina, she hadn't been to Murfreesboro until the next evening, when she and her husband found Jack dead at his kitchen table.
She stated that she was in Woodbury the entire time after he dropped her off.
But was it the truth? Looking through the paperwork Tina brought in, the title document for a used car happened to catch the investigators' eye.
He notices that there is a spot on it. He believes that spot to be blood.
It was far from enough to make an arrest, but the investigator did send the car title off to the crime lab. And then they went to Tina's house.
We executed a search warrant and recovered a Smith & Wesson .22 caliber pistol.
And in addition to a gun the same caliber as the one that killed Jack, the investigators also found a box of bullets.
5 shells, the same number that Mr. Raines was killed with, were missing from that box.
But did that mean the gun was the murder weapon? To find out, the investigators sent the pistol and the box of bullets to the crime lab. And then, to determine whether or not Tina had stayed in Woodbury as she claimed, the investigators pulled Tina's cell phone records.
The cell phone records show that she had made 2 to 3 phone calls on the day that Mr. Raines was killed.
And by triangulating which towers those calls were routed through, the investigators could roughly determine where Tina had been when she made those calls.
Tina had made calls that were actually pinging off the cell phone tower nearest to the victim's home.
The cell phone tower was in visible range of Mr. Raines' backyard.
And off of Twin Oak Drive, which is just one street over from my dad's house.
And Tina's claim that she hadn't been to Murfreesboro on the day of the murder?
Tina was actually lying about her whereabouts on the date of Mr. Raines' murder.
But as damning as catching Tina in a lie was, the timing of those two phone calls was even worse.
One was at 11:40 a.m., and another one was somewhere right around noon.
In other words, within the window the medical examiner believed that the murder occurred.
The part of the investigation that really pointed the finger at Tina was the cell phone conversations.
Still, even if Tina was in Murfreesboro at the time of the murder, the fact that she couldn't drive left one lingering question for the investigators. How did she get home?
Tina lived in Woodbury. The victim lived in Murfreesboro. The distance between their two houses was about 25 miles.
Could the phone calls that Tina made provide an answer? The two made at around the time of the murder were both to a friend of Tina's from Woodbury, a woman named Betty.
Once we realized that Tina was calling Betty, we located Betty and spoke with her about that.
And why had Tina called Betty on the morning of the murder?
She needed her to come and pick her up.
According to Betty, Tina asked her to give her a ride home from Murfreesboro.
Come pick her up on John Bragg Highway near Walmart, which is actually just a walking distance from the victim's house.
Based on all of those facts, the detectives then went to Walmart and wanted to see if they could find any evidence.
Specifically, they pulled the store's surveillance footage.
They were lucky enough to find a video camera that showed not only the Walmart parking lot, but also showed portions of John Bragg Highway.
And not long after the estimated time that Jack's murder occurred, guess who appeared?
They saw her on the cameras. They saw her walking down the road.
Once we realized that Tina was calling Betty for a ride from the victim's house, Tina was a prime suspect at that point.
But was it enough to prove that Tina had shot her elderly friend 5 times?
We didn't have any witnesses that would actually say they saw this. So we had to build the circumstances.
To further build their circumstantial case, the investigators got back in touch with Tina's friend, Betty.
They asked if she would place a phone call to Tina Williamson.
A phone call that the investigators got on tape.
The cops called me, and they want to set up an appointment to meet me.
And then, after allowing the implications of that to sink in, Betty proceeded to lay a trap for Tina.
I want to know what you want me to tell them and what you want me not to tell them.
And Tina immediately fell for it.
The main thing not to tell them is about that ride.
She stressed to her, do not tell the police about that ride.
That puts me in the vicinity. That puts me in Murfreesboro.
But would the tape of Tina asking her friend to lie to the investigators also be enough to put her in jail?
The police, based on all the facts and circumstances that they have developed, decided to take this case to the grand jury.
And on December 4th, just hours after they presented their case to the grand jury, the Rutherford County investigators made the 30-minute drive to Woodbury.
All of a sudden, they're knocking on the door, and they're taking Tina away in handcuffs.
My mom was arrested for the death of Jack Raines, and I was just shocked, honestly.
Coming up, just what was the true nature of Jack and Tina's relationship?
On his boxer shorts were a mixture of his and Tina's DNA.
And did that give her a motive for murder?
He was going to give everything to Tina.
On January 27, 2009, Tina Williamson went on trial at the Rutherford County Circuit Court in Murfreesboro, Tennessee. The 40-year-old mother of 2 was accused of murdering 83-year-old General Jack Raines in September of 2007.
Jack had been shot 5 times in the back of the head.
Tina swore she was innocent.
She had nothing to do with this. It was just as much of a shock to her as it was to me and my father and my whole family.
But the prosecutor was confident he could get a conviction,
I felt that the case was very strong circumstantially.
including strong circumstantial evidence that put Tina near the scene of the crime at the approximate time the murder occurred.
One of them was the pings on the cell phone towers to prove that she was in Murfreesboro and near Jack's house. And the other piece was the cameras from Walmart showed her walking down the highway before she was picked up.
The prosecutors also had the statement of the woman who'd picked her up, her friend, Betty.
She came to Murfreesboro and picked her up on John Bragg Highway.
The investigators had even gotten Tina on tape, telling her friend to lie to the authorities.
The main thing not to tell them is about that ride.
And among the various financial papers in Tina's possession, they'd also found a document with a single drop of blood on it.
The crime laboratory determines the blood is that of Mr. Jack Raines.
But why would Tina want to murder the 83-year-old, the man her children and stepchildren considered a second grandfather?
Over time, he became family. I loved him to death.
According to the prosecutors, it was simple: money.
She had 110,000 reasons to kill General Raines.
10,000 was the balance of the joint checking account Tina and Jack shared. And the 100,000 was the certificate of deposit she'd tried to cash in soon after his death.
A few days later, after Mr. Raines' body had been discovered, Miss Williamson comes back into the bank and she tries to withdraw the $100,000 CD amount.
She had gotten Jack to put her name on the CD account.
But despite having her name on the account, Tina hadn't gotten her hands on the cash.
Because she does not have a death certificate, the bank delays her and she does not get that money.
Once she became a suspect, the account had been frozen. But did the fact that she'd tried to get her hands on the $100,000 prove that she'd murdered Jack? After all, it was a joint account.
He had said he was going to leave it to her should something happen to him.
Or was conning the elderly man out of his estate Tina's plan all along? Tina did have a history of fraud.
She was even in jail for approximately 3 years in federal prison for credit card fraud and criminal impersonation.
And when her husband introduced her to Jack, did she figure the elderly man was an easy mark? That's what several members of his family suggested when they took the stand for the prosecution.
The Raines family felt like Tina had came into Jack's life and just kind of separated him from his family.
He would go to family functions with Tina and her family and go to Christmas with Tina.
And according to the family, Tina's kindness had an ulterior motive.
She was taking advantage of him,
especially when it came to the elderly man's finances.
She had gotten him to change a lot of documents, legal documents, and put her name on there instead of family members that were on there before.
Every opportunity that she got, she took advantage of it.
Tina had brainwashed him.
And it appeared that after a lifetime of passing bad checks and credit card fraud, Tina was angling for her biggest payoff ever.
It was his intention, according to Tina and others, that he was going to revise his will and give everything to Tina upon his death.
Was it simply a matter of looking out for his business partner? Not according to Jack.
Mr. Raines had told several people that Miss Williamson was his girlfriend.
Something may be going on romantically.
That's what some of Jack's friends believed, despite the 40-year difference in their ages.
People testified that they had seen affections in public.
He was very devoted to her.
But just how far did Jack and Tina's relationship go? The crime scene may have offered a clue.
General Raines was found seated at his kitchen table. He was wearing an undershirt and a pair of boxer shorts.
And when the crime lab tested those shorts, they made a surprising discovery.
On his boxer shorts were a mixture of his semen and Tina's DNA.
That would be consistent with Tina Williamson and General Rains engaging in some type of sexual activity, and then General Rains putting on the boxer shorts.
It suggested that they were lovers.
But did that mean she'd killed him? According to the defense, the answer was no.
They did not have a murder weapon.
And that was despite the fact that the investigators had found a .22 in Tina's possession, the same caliber as the gun that killed Jack.
The pistol that was seized from the search warrant could not be positively identified as the weapon.
And according to the defense, there was no way that Tina, who suffered from a debilitating back injury, could have pulled the trigger either.
The defense argued that she didn't have the physical capability to kill him.
According to the defense, Tina was a feeble person who could not have committed this crime.
It would have been difficult for her physically to have fired that weapon in the manner it was fired.
And even if she had been capable of shooting Jack, the defense said there was no way she would have done it.
It's obvious that Tina felt genuine affection for Jack Rains.
Just not that kind of affection, according to the defense. Tina denied the affair, and the defense claimed that there was a perfectly innocent explanation for the DNA found on Jack's boxers.
One of the reasons my mom's DNA could have been on Jack's shorts was because she cleaned his house and she did his laundry for him.
But the defense focused on refuting the prosecution's claim that Tina had killed Jack for money.
My mom had no financial motive to kill Jack. He gave her money.
To be sure, at his death, she gained some, but she would have gained much, much more with him living.
According to the defense, in addition to the money they made buying and selling cars, Jack would regularly help Tina pay her mortgage or make her husband's car payment.
Whenever she couldn't make a payment, which was probably most of the time, she would call Jack and get him to make the payment on it.
He was footing the bill for a lot of that stuff.
Tina had absolutely no reason that she wanted Mr. Rains dead.
And the fact that she had tried to cash in on their joint CD after Jack's death. The defense claimed that Tina had simply done what her dead friend would have wanted.
He had told me that he was going to be giving it to her whenever, he passed on.
And if that was true, why bother killing the 83-year-old when she could just wait it out? The prosecution suggested that after 4 years, maybe Tina had lost her patience.
I think that greed took over, and she decided that she wanted to get the $10,000, she wanted to get the $100,000, and that's the steps she took to get those.
The defense dismissed the notion.
She profited more by him being alive than being dead.
In fact, the defense was so confident that they disproved the prosecution's motive that they rested their case without calling Tina to the stand.
There was nothing she probably could have added to the actual facts in the case.
Or, as the prosecutors believed, was there another reason Tina was reluctant to testify?
Because we had the tapes of her saying, "Don't tell them about the ride." She would have to take the stand and basically call a large number of witnesses liars.
Coming up, do the prosecutors have enough evidence for a conviction?
She killed the golden goose.
Or is their case fatally flawed?
She had absolutely no motive based on the proof that I had seen.
On February 4th, 2009, the jury announced it had reached a verdict in Tina Williamson's murder trial. The 40-year-old mother of two was accused of killing 83-year-old General Jack Rains.
There was a lot of interest in this case, and one of those reasons may have been some suggestion that they were just more than friends.
And whether the 83-year-old was truly Tina's sugar daddy or not, there was no doubt they'd had a close financial relationship.
Mr. Raines had been giving her money, had been very, very profitable for her to have a relationship with him.
A relationship the prosecution claimed that Tina had ended with 5 shots to the back of Jack's head.
Her financial motive wasn't that she needed money, it was that she was greedy and wanted more. We believe that she killed the golden goose.
But the defense asked why, if he really was the golden goose, would Tina kill him?
She had absolutely no motive, based on the proof that I had seen, for killing Jack Raines.
And the prosecution's proof that she had killed Jack Raines was largely circumstantial.
We did not have a definite murder weapon.
The prosecution confirmed that it was a .22 caliber weapon that was used to kill Mr. Raines, but they could not confirm that that weapon belonged to Tina.
But would that be enough to sway the jury's decision?
I was both excited for it to come and, be over with, but I was also dreading it because you never know what's going to happen.
It all came down to the reading of the verdict.
Tina was found guilty of second-degree murder and felony murder.
The news left Tina's family shattered.
I was just blown away when they said she was guilty. I didn't know what to think.
I was just dumbfounded. And I was like, this is real. This actually happened.
But Tina seemed surprisingly calm.
She reacted stoically. She showed no real emotion.
To the verdict, at least. But her sentencing hearing in April was a different story.
Tina received a sentence of life without the possibility of parole.
She hung her head, and I believe she was even crying.
For Jack's family, the outcome was just.
She'll be there for her lifetime, and so that was good enough for justice for the family.
Anybody that would shoot someone in the back of the head several times has to be somewhat evil.
But to this day, opinions in Murfreesboro and Woodbury remain divided.
Some people believe that Jack and Tina had a father and daughter relationship, and then others in the town believe that, there was a little bit more happening there.
And despite Tina's conviction, her family still maintains that she's innocent.
I think she was at the wrong place at the wrong time. I believe she made herself look very bad to the police. But I think it was also that the cops, they just looked at the first person who looked most like a suspect.
See that? That was amazing. I love this.
The crisp, clean air of Murfreesboro, Tennessee, a suburban haven just 40 minutes southeast of the vibrant energy of Nashville, often carries with the quiet hum of ordinary life. It is a place where middle-class dreams find comfortable homes, and where the rhythm of days is typically measured by family gatherings, community events, and the gentle passage of time. Yet, on one particular late summer Saturday, the 1st of September, in the year 2007, this placid harmony was shattered by a discovery that would ripple through the lives of many, exposing hidden truths and challenging the very definitions of friendship and trust. This is a story of a relationship that, on the surface, seemed to blossom from an unlikely bond, only to wither under the harsh light of greed and deception, culminating in an act of profound betrayal. Tina Williamson, a woman then 39 years of age, possessed a vivacious spirit that seemed to defy the quietude of her surroundings. She was a quintessential talk-your-ear-off kind of person, a gregarious soul who navigated social circles with an easy charm and an undeniable magnetism. Her laughter was quick, her conversations endless, and her presence, once noted, was rarely forgotten. It was the same effervescent quality that characterized Jack Raines, an 83-year-old gentleman whose zest for life remained undimmed by the passage of 8, decades. Jack, too, was a profoundly fun-loving guy, perpetually alive for the party, quick with a joke, and eager to engage with the world around him. He embodied a spirit of youthful exuberance that belied his advanced years, a man who collected not just curios, but also conversations and connections. When Tina and Jack's paths intersected, it was almost inevitable that they would strike up a friendship, despite the significant chasm of 44 years that separated their ages. They found common ground in their outgoing natures and their shared appreciation for lively discourse. Their bond deepened swiftly, evolving into a closeness that many in their small community might have found touching, even endearing, to an outside observer witnessing them together. The visual impression often painted a picture of a devoted daughter alongside her doting father, a tableau of familial affection that seemed both natural and heartwarming. However, their connection extended beyond mere companionship. They were also partners in a rather modest business venture. Their enterprise involved the buying and selling of used cars, often what one might affectionately call old junkers, vehicles purchased with the hope of a quick cleanup, a minor repair, and then a swift resale for a profit of a few $100s. This shared endeavor not only provided a practical purpose for their time together, but also served as another thread weaving their lives into a more intricate tapestry. But the tapestry, woven with threads of friendship and commerce, was abruptly and violently unraveled on that fateful September Saturday. The news, when it finally emerged, was stark and brutal. Jack Raines had been shot 5 times. The sheer number of wounds, particularly the repeated assault, spoke not of a random act, but of something far more personal, far more vicious. The immediate aftermath of the crime scene suggested a desperate struggle, or perhaps a frantic search. Almost every drawer within Jack's Murfreesboro home had been pulled open, its contents scattered carelessly, and objects had been strewn about, creating an impression of chaos and of violent intrusion. Initial theories among the first responders and a shocked community inevitably turned to the specter of a robbery gone tragically wrong. It was a common, if heartbreaking, narrative in such cases. Yet, even as this possibility was considered, other questions began to surface, casting long shadows over the seemingly simple explanation. Did the old man, Jack Raines, have enemies? It was a query that seemed incongruous with his jovial public persona. However, as investigators would soon discover, Jack's life contained a lesser-known facet. His generosity, while commendable, sometimes came with a price. He was known to lend money to people who were down and out, individuals struggling to make ends meet, a practice that, as with any informal lending, carried the potential for friction, resentment, and even dangerous disputes. Or, and this was the most unsettling thought, could Tina and Jack's partnership have taken a surprising, indeed, a scandalous turn? Whispers began to circulate, subtle at first, then gaining momentum, suggesting that their connection was not strictly business. This hint of a deeper, more complicated, and perhaps illicit dynamic added a layer of psychological complexity to the tragedy, transforming it from a mere crime into a compelling human drama. The stage for this unfolding mystery was Murfreesboro, Tennessee, and the date etched into the community's memory was September 1st, 2007. It was a late summer Saturday, the air still thick with the lingering warmth of August, when Tina Williamson and her husband Ron pulled their vehicle to a stop in front of a modest, well-maintained home in Murfreesboro. This suburban town, 40 minutes southeast of Nashville, was characterized by its comfortable, middle-class neighborhoods, dotted with pleasant homes that spoke of quiet aspirations and settled lives. Tina, then 39 years old, and Ron, her husband, typically resided half an hour away in the smaller, more rural community of Woodbury, Tennessee. Their journey that day, however, was not for leisure or typical Saturday errands. It was driven by a deepening sense of unease, a premonition that something was amiss. They had come to Murfreesboro to check on Tina's close friend, the venerable 83-year-old Jack Raines. Tina, in her conversations with family and friends, had often described Mr. Raines as an integral part of their extended family. She spoke of him with genuine affection, conveying a profound sense of responsibility and care that bordered on the maternal. She watched over him almost, a phrase that captured protective instinct she felt for the elderly gentleman, and it was clear to all who knew them that she cared about him a lot. This deep affection was now tinged with a growing apprehension. They had made multiple attempts to reach him, calling his cell phone, then his home landline, but each call had gone unanswered, each ring a hollow echo of silence. This lack of communication was profoundly unusual, a stark deviation from their established routine. We were at least on the phone with him every day. We had contact, Tina would later explain, emphasizing the anomaly of his sudden inaccessibility. The daily ritual of connection had been broken. And for Tina, this was a clear signal for concern. Thus, their Saturday mission was clear. They were going to go by and check on him in person, to quell the burgeoning fears that now gnawed at her. The landscape of Tina's worries was varied, encompassing the myriad frailties that could beset an individual in their 9th decade of life. Had her elderly friend suffer fall, rendering him helpless and unable to call for assistance? Was he suddenly overcome by an illness, a silent affliction that had left him incapacitated? Did he require urgent medical help? Trapped within his own home, awaiting rescue? These were the questions that swirled in her mind, each more distressing than the last. She knew, with the intuitive understanding that comes from genuine concern, that in his age that there's a lot of stuff that could have happened. He could have gotten hurt or anything. The possibilities, each more grim than the last, fueled her anxiety as they approached Jack's familiar residence. Upon their arrival at Jack's front door, the vague, unsettling worry that had prompted their journey swiftly transmuted into a palpable, cold fear. They knocked, they called out, they waited, but silence was the only reply. When they went over there, they couldn't get anybody to answer. The lack of response, usually a signal for them to retreat and try again later, was, on this day, amplified by the preceding hours of unanswered calls. Fortunately, Tina and her husband possessed a key to Jack's home, a testament to the depth of their relationship and the level of trust Jack had placed in them. It was a key that, on any other day, would have been used for an easy, informal entry, a casual visit. On this day, however, it became the instrument of an unwelcome revelation. As they let themselves in, the sense of dread that had been building intensified almost immediately. What they found within the seemingly ordinary suburban home was profoundly disturbing. The house, usually meticulously kept, was completely ransacked. A wave of disorder greeted them, an aggressive jumble that spoke of a frantic search or a violent intrusion. Almost every drawer had been opened, their contents strewn about, their intimate secrets laid bare. Things had been thrown around, creating a chaotic tableau that instantly conveyed a sense of violated sanctuary. Driven by an instinct that merged fear with a desperate hope, Tina immediately headed for the bedroom, her voice echoing through disheveled rooms as she called out for Jack, her tone a mix of urgency and rising panic. Simultaneously, her husband began his own search, moving through the desecrated house towards the kitchen, utterly unprepared for the gruesome discovery that awaited him. It was there, amidst the disarray of what should have been a place of comfort and nourishment, that the horrifying truth was unveiled. That's where he found Mr. Raines. Tina's elderly friend, the man who was like a father to her, was discovered at the kitchen table, a scene that typically signifies warmth and company, but was now utterly desolate. He was slumped in his chair, an unnatural posture that instantly signaled tragedy. His form was covered with blood, a chilling testament to the violence that had transpired. He had been shot in the back of the head. There was no doubt, no room for medical intervention, no flicker of life. He was clearly dead. The immediate, Visceral reaction to such a discovery, once the shock begins to recede, is an insistent gnawing question. Why? Why would someone commit such an act against an 83-year-old man, seemingly a pillar of his community? Was it, as the initial chaotic scene suggested, simply a robbery gone wrong, a violent opportunism that spiraled into murder? Or, as the unsettling whispers had hinted, was it possible that Tina and her elderly friend shared a scandalous secret, a hidden aspect of their relationship that provided a motive far more intricate and personal than mere theft? The profound shock and emotional impact of this question were perhaps best encapsulated by a later comment, a raw expression of disbelief and pain. When I had heard the rumor, I was shot. I was shot. The discovery of Jack Raines' body was not merely the end of a life, but the beginning of a complex, unsettling investigation, one that would peel back layers of deception and expose uncomfortable truths. Born in 1968, Tina Williamson's roots were firmly planted an hour and a half southeast of Nashville, in the small, close-knit town of McMinnville, Tennessee. Her early life, as recollected by those who knew her, painted a picture of a typical Middle Tennessee upbringing. Her mother would later affirm, "My mom, Tina, was from Middle Tennessee. She stayed in the McMinnville and Woodbury area pretty much her whole life," a testament to the gravitational pull of her hometown. From an early age, Tina was characterized as a happy, friendly child, attributes that blossomed into a notably outgoing personality as she matured. She was very loud and talkative, talk your ear off kind of person, a description that perfectly captured her natural charisma and her ability to effortlessly engage with others, a trait that would remain with her throughout her life, sometimes to her advantage, sometimes less so. As a teenager, Tina's vibrant personality proved popular, particularly with the boys. It was during these formative high school years, specifically at Riverdale, that she met her future husband, the man who would become her first true love. The classic narrative of high school sweethearts unfolded, culminating in their marriage in 1986. Her stepdaughter would later note, she was still in high school when they got together and got married. This early commitment to matrimony was soon followed by another significant life event, occurring while she was still navigating the complexities of adolescence. She was also still in high school when she got pregnant. It was a momentous change, ushering her into adulthood perhaps sooner than anticipated. I think she was 17 when she faced this profound shift, a young woman embarking on motherhood. Tina, with the practical fortitude that often characterizes those facing unexpected challenges, dropped out of school to embrace her new role, giving birth to a son. Her daughter, Jessica, followed approximately 3 years later, cementing her identity as a young mother with a growing family. However, the idyllic vision of high school romance giving way to a stable family life proved to be an elusive dream. The immense pressures of raising a family, compounded by the tender age at which they embarked upon this journey, proved too much for the young couple. By 1990, when Tina was just 22 years old, her teenage marriage had succumbed to these strains, ending in divorce. The dissolution of her marriage ushered in a period of considerable difficulty, marked by financial instability and a transient lifestyle. Her children often lived with her grandparents and their father, creating a custody arrangement where, as her daughter recalled, "We only saw her, on the weekends." This was largely because Tina was struggling, working through a series of jobs, each one a temporary solution in her ongoing quest for stability. She typically worked small jobs, waitressing, taking care of elderly people, just different jobs, a patchwork career path that indicated a restless spirit or perhaps a continuous search for better opportunities. One consistent characteristic of this period was her inability to settle. She didn't hold it down a job for very long before moving on to another job. The turning point, or at least a promise of one, arrived in 1992. while working at an auto parts plant, a job that likely provided a degree of practical experience and perhaps a slightly more stable income than her previous ventures. She met Ron Williamson. Ron, 12 years Tina's senior, was a long-haul trucker, a profession that kept him on the road for extended periods, but also provided a steady income. He was also a father, with 2 young daughters from a previous marriage. Tina and Ron's relationship blossomed quickly, and soon after they began dating. Tina moved into Ron's apartment. Her presence brought not only companionship, but also crucial support in raising his young girls. During his frequent absences, her stepdaughter would later recount, with profound affection, "Tina came into my life earlier than I can even remember. All my childhood memories. She was right there. She took care of me, and she was like another mom to me." This heartfelt testimony underscored the genuine bond Tina forged with Ron's children, portraying her as a nurturing and integral figure in their lives. The couple solidified their commitment in 1997, marrying when Tina was 29. This period marked a significant step towards the stability and prosperity she had yearned for. They purchased a house in Woodbury, a small community not far from Tina's hometown of McMinnville, establishing a new foundation for their family. By all outward appearances, Tina's life had finally settled into a comfortable rhythm. She lived in a nice house. She had a hard-working husband, and she was, by all intents and purposes, prosperous. It seemed she had, at last, found a calm harbor after years of navigating turbulent waters. However, just as things seemed to be looking up, fate, in its often cruel and unpredictable manner, presented Tina with a new and formidable challenge. In 2004, a serious auto accident irrevocably altered the trajectory of her life. The description of the incident painted a harrowing picture. She had a plane and just kind of went off the road and flipped her truck a few times, and it threw her out in the middle of tumbling. The sheer violence of the crash was undeniable. Tina was incredibly fortunate to have survived. Tina was lucky to be alive, a sentiment echoed by all who witnessed the aftermath. The physical toll, however, was immense. Her back was broken, and they had a life fighter. It was awful. The recovery was arduous, fraught with pain and limitations, and it soon became clear that her life, as she knew it, would never be the same. The accident left Tina with significant, debilitating injuries that profoundly impacted her daily existence. After her accident, Tina wasn't able to do a lot of things that she was used to. Her injuries rendered her unable to drive, severing a crucial link to independence in a rural community. More profoundly, she could barely walk. The initial period of recovery necessitated mobility aid. At first, she had to have a walker, while she eventually progressed to the point where she could walk without one. The lingering effects of the trauma meant she was never well enough to return to waiting tables, or cleaning houses, or any of the other jobs she'd often held. Simple physical tasks became immense hurdles. She couldn't stand very long. She had to stop and take breaks and just rest. The vibrant, outgoing woman was now tethered by physical constraints. Despite Tina's inability to work, the family managed to navigate these new financial realities. She applied for and began receiving disability benefits, a crucial lifeline that helped cover household expenses. But while the disability checks helped pay the bills, they did little to address Tina's boredom. For a woman of her energetic disposition, the forced inactivity was a torment. She hated just sitting around, a sentiment that perfectly captured her inherent need for engagement and purpose. It was this deep-seated desire to escape the confines of her home and her own body that would, ironically, open the door to a new relationship, one that promised connection and activity, but would ultimately lead to unforeseen and tragic consequences. Her life, far from remaining sedentary, was about to take a dramatic and fateful turn, thanks, in part, to General Jack Rains. General Jack Rains, born in 1924 within the serene landscapes of Cannon County, Tennessee, embodied a generation of Americans who served their nation and their communities with quiet, dedication. The moniker Granddaddy spent time in the Air Force and went to the Tennessee Highway Patrol spoke volumes about a life dedicated to order, duty, and public service. It is important to clarify, however, that the title general was not an earned military rank or an official distinction. Rather, general was his first name. Jack was kind of like a nickname, a more familiar and accessible appellation by which most people came to know and fondly remember him. By the time he crossed paths with Tina Williamson in 2003, Jack was long retired, a venerable figure approaching his 80th birthday, living alone in his Murfreesboro home. His wife, a long-term resident of a nursing home in the same town, represented another aspect of his solitary existence. Yet, despite his advanced age and the circumstances of his living situation, Jack showed no signs of slowing down. He was a man propelled by an enduring vitality and an insatiable appetite for life. He genuinely liked to be around people, and he liked to get out and do things. A social dynamo whose calendar was rarely empty. He moved through his community with an easygoing confidence, described as someone who kind of come and went as he pleased, indicating a man comfortable in his own skin, dictating his own pace. His ubiquitous presence ensured he was well known in the community. A familiar fixture, he maintained a daily ritual. We would eat in the mornings at Waffle House a lot. There, he was more than a regular customer. He always knew all the waitresses and the waiters and the cooks and would talk to all of them. They knew him by name. This anecdote perfectly illustrated his personable nature, his genuine interest in others, and his ability to forge connections wherever he went. He was, as many attested, always a fun-loving guy, alive for the party. He liked to joke around and kid around, radiating a warmth and humor that drew people to him. Beyond his social engagements, Jack was also a man who liked to keep himself busy, driven by an entrepreneurial spirit and a passion for collecting and trading. Granddaddy Jack was always doing something, his hands and mind constantly engaged in various ventures. His interests were eclectic, ranging from buying and trading, selling guns and knives, and whatever was his passion at that time. This hobby, this love of trading, was precisely how he met Tina. Their initial encounter occurred at a local flea market in Woodbury, where Tina's husband, sharing Jack's interest in firearms, struck up a conversation about guns. This exchange led to an invitation for the elderly gentleman to visit their home, to see his gun collection, and, crucially, to meet his wife, Tina. They met whenever they were at the flea market in Woodbury, a seemingly innocuous beginning to a relationship that would become anything but, while Jack continued to engage with Tina's husband in discussions about trading. It was with Tina that he forged an even deeper, more complex connection. He looked at her as emotional support, I guess as a friend, a role she seemed to naturally fulfill. Their bond was, in many ways, an unlikely one, transcending the formidable more than 40-year difference in their ages. However, they found common ground, a shared understanding rooted in their individual experiences of physical limitation. Tina, having suffered a severe auto accident 3 years prior, was left partially disabled, unable to drive, and experiencing persistent pain. Jack, in his late 70s, also faced the natural constraints that come with advanced age, a diminished capacity for some physical activities. Because she wasn't able to get out and do things that she wanted to, they understood each other. It was, in a sense, a mutual commiseration, a shared experience of thwarted desire. I guess that's sort of the equivalent of being older and not being able to get out and do what you want to. This shared vulnerability allowed them to bond, and they almost became best friends. Their days were soon filled with shared activities. They would just go do things together and help each other out. Given Tina's inability to drive after her accident, Jack naturally stepped into the role of her chauffeur, a practical arrangement that further cemented their daily interactions. Mr. Raines would come by and pick her up, facilitating her mobility and enabling her to escape the confines of her home. Beyond providing transportation, Jack also offered Tina something invaluable, a renewed sense of purpose and engagement. He involved her in one of his many trading ventures, transforming her boredom into active participation. They were in the business of selling and buying used cars. Their modus operandi was straightforward. They would buy a car and clean it up, fix it up, and then they would sell that car. These were mostly old junkers, humble vehicles that, with a bit of effort, could be flipped for a couple $100. The financial gains were modest, certainly not enough to constitute a lavish income, but it did give the two friends something to do together. This shared enterprise created a comforting and predictable routine. They'd go through, they'd take her to breakfast, and then they'd go buy a car. Before long, Jack Raines transitioned from being a mere friend to an integral part of Tina and Ron's family. Fabric. They invited him to have dinner and everything, and then that became kind of a weekly routine. His presence at their table became as familiar and anticipated as any blood relative. Indeed, so deep was his integration that lots of people assumed Jack was family. The visual dynamic reinforced this perception. If you saw them together, they might look like a daughter and father. He became a fixture at their celebrations, commemorating birthdays, for holidays, truly integrating into their domestic life. She became a pretty good part of his life, a statement that, in retrospect, carried a weight of foreshadowing. But as the calendar turned to September of 2007, after 4 years of friendship that had seemingly enriched both their lives, Jack Raines would suddenly and brutally be excised from Tina's existence, forever. The abruptness of his departure would leave a gaping void, not just in Tina's life, but in the community that had come to know and respect him. As the immediate shock gave way to an urgent need for answers, the authorities would embark on an investigation, delving into the quiet suburban life of Jack Raines. Their initial theory, one rooted in the visible chaos of the crime scene, suggested this was just a robbery gone bad. Yet, as the layers of Jack's life were peeled back, surprising secrets would be uncovered, revealing a man far more complex than his genial exterior suggested, and introducing some tough characters into the narrative. The journey to justice had just begun, and it would prove to be a winding path, filled with unexpected turns and unsettling revelations. It was late in the evening of September 1st, in the year 2007, when the chilling sound of phone ringing pierced the quietude of the Murfreesboro Dispatch Center. On the other end of the line was Ron Williamson, the husband of 39-year-old Tina Williamson. His voice, undoubtedly laced with shock and distress, delivered a grim report. He and Tina had just made a horrific discovery. Their elderly friend, General Jack Raines, lay dead within the confines of his own Murfreesboro, Tennessee home. Ron recounted to the 911 dispatcher the escalating worry, the unanswered calls, and their desperate journey to Murfreesboro to try to discover what, if anything, was going on. The subsequent, horrifying discovery was conveyed with a raw, undeniable truth. The 83-year-old Air Force veteran, a man cherished by many, had been brutally murdered. The scene in Jack's kitchen was a tableau of unspeakable violence. Mr. Raines had been found seated at his kitchen table, a place typically associated with warmth, conversation, and the comforting rituals of daily life. Yet, on this day, it had become the stage for his final moments. He had been shot 5 times in the back of the head. The forensic analysis of the bullet wounds painted a particularly chilling picture of the assault. The attacker had initially discharged the weapon 3 times in the back of the head from A distance, indicating a deliberate, perhaps cautious approach. But this initial volley was followed by a more intimate, more savage act. The perpetrator got closer and shot him another time. The final, 5th shot was perhaps the most disturbing, described as a contact wound where the gun was placed in the back of his head, suggesting an act of cold, calculated execution. eliminating any lingering possibility of survival. Based on the positioning of Jack's body, slumped in his chair at the kitchen table, the investigators deduced a terrifying conclusion. Jack had been caught utterly unaware by his attacker. There was no appearance as if there was any kind of struggle, suggesting either a sudden, overwhelming assault or an ambush by someone Jack knew and trusted. Someone he allowed into his personal space without suspicion. The lack of defensive wounds, the absence of overturned furniture beyond the initial ransacking, all pointed to a swift, decisive act of violence against a defenseless man. The immediate question that consumed the minds of the responding officers and detectives was the fundamental motive. Why would someone slip into Jack's home and commit such a heinous act? The initial, most obvious theory, one fueled by the visible disarray of the home, posited that this was just a robbery gone bad. The scattered contents of drawers, the overturned objects, all seemed to scream of a desperate search for valuables. This theory led to broader inquiries. Was someone targeting the neighborhood? Murfreesboro was, after all, a nice little place, mostly retired people living in the neighborhood, a demographic often perceived as vulnerable, making them potential targets for opportunistic criminals. Alternatively, had the perpetrator targeted Jack specifically? Perhaps an angry buyer from his used car business, someone feeling swindled or aggrieved, had returned for a violent confrontation. As one investigator sagely noted, anybody that has dealings involving automobiles, they're going to have disgruntled folks. While murdering an 83-year-old man over perceived lemon might seem over the top, the unpredictable nature of human rage could not be dismissed. However, even as these initial theories were considered, a few critical details at the crime scene immediately arrested the investigators' attention, subtly but powerfully shifting their perspective. One of the first things they noticed was there were no signs of forced entry. This was a significant anomaly. A professional burglar typically leaves a calling card of forced entry. The absence of such a sign suggested a more intimate, less straightforward intrusion. But that wasn't all. While the house had indeed been ransacked, with almost every drawer had been opened and things had been thrown around, there was a perplexing contradiction. A lot of items of value that were not taken. Precious articles such as jewelry and electronics, items that are typically prime targets for thieves, remained untouched. This observation struck a discordant note. As a veteran investigator articulated, with the wisdom gleaned from countless cases, we've investigated so many burglaries. You know, the items of value are the things that go first. The selective nature of the ransacking, the conspicuous absence of missing high-value items, raised some serious questions about what had at first looked like a robbery gone bad. The immediate, chilling conclusion drawn by the seasoned detectives was unambiguous. My partner and I both suspected that it had been staged. The crime scene, rather than being a straightforward narrative of theft, now presented itself as a carefully constructed deception designed to mislead. Suddenly, the investigators realized they were not merely dealing with a tragic robbery, but with a real mystery, one requiring psychological acumen as much as forensic skill. Hopeful for some initial answers, they naturally turned to the first witnesses at the scene, Tina Williamson and her husband Ron. Tina, in her initial interview with the detectives, presented as a woman profoundly affected by the loss. She was fighting back tears when she spoke to the detectives. Her demeanor conveyed genuine grief. She seemed distraught. The officers observed that she really loved Mr. Raines because, he was a grandfather. They figured. This perception aligned with the familial role Jack had seemingly adopted. Tina appeared to be a woman who had lost someone that she cared about, someone that she loved. Her emotional state was so profound that she had a very hard time just even getting the words out of her mouth, suggesting a deep personal impact. Eventually, through her grief, Tina managed to provide the detectives with her account of the last time she had seen Jack alive, She recounted that it had been the day before, on Friday, August 31st, when Jack had driven into Woodbury. Mr. Raines had gone that morning to Woodbury, to her home, picked her up, then took her out to breakfast at a local fast food restaurant. This was, by her account, a cherished ritual, something they did almost every Friday. An outing Tina had always looked forward to since a near-fatal car accident 3 years earlier had left her on disability and unable to drive. She emphasized her limited mobility. She was at home a lot. She didn't really get out much. After breakfast, Tina continued. They had run a couple of errands, typical mundane tasks, and then Jack had dropped her off back at her home. Tina Williamson stated emphatically, when interviewed by police, that she had not been in Murfreesboro at all the day of August 31st, 2007. This claim, a critical piece of her alibi, would later undergo intense scrutiny. When she didn't hear from Jack the following Saturday morning, Tina said she had started to worry, a concern shared by her husband, Ron, who was home for the weekend. They thought it was odd that they hadn't heard from him. An understandable reaction, given their daily contact. When pressed about who might have had a reason to kill Jack, Tina claimed to have no idea. She reiterated his good nature. He was just such a great person. The investigators followed up with Jack's family, hoping to gain further insight into any potential adversaries or disputes. Yet, Jack's relatives were just as mystified as Tina. His granddaughter reflected the general sentiment. As far as who I thought may be responsible, I didn't have any idea at the time. My grandfather was well-liked, and there was no one that disliked him that I know of. The initial interviews yielded no clear leads, no obvious enemies, leaving the detectives to sift through the increasingly complex narrative of Jack Raines' life. The following Sunday, while the detectives diligently continued their follow-up interviews with family and friends, Tina Williamson orchestrated her own form of remembrance. A picnic she had originally planned to share with Jack at the city park was transformed into an impromptu memorial service for her murdered friend. She had a tribute to Mr. Range, a little lunch out at the park where she had his military pictures. And all these things. It was a public display of grief and affection, serving to underscore the depth of her perceived loss within the community. Jack's formal funeral, held on Wednesday, was an even more elaborate affair, a solemn occasion designed to highlight his long and distinguished service to both his country and his community. The Patriot Riders were there, and we had the color guard there, lending a dignified, ceremonial air to the proceedings. And of course, Tina was there too, a visible figure among the mourners. She seemed pretty visibly upset. Her grief was expressed in raw terms. She was very heartbroken, and she expressed to me, she said, "You know, I love Mr. Range." Her performance, as it would later be viewed, was impeccable, playing the role of the devoted, grieving friend to perfection. By the time the community gathered en masse at Jack's funeral, united in their collective sorrow and a shared desire to support his grieving family and friends, the detectives, working tirelessly behind the scenes, had begun to piece together crucial elements surrounding Jack's murder. Forensic evidence provided a precise timeline. When Ron and Tina had found the body on Saturday evening, Jack had been dead for more than 24 hours. The medical examiner's report offered an even more specific window, estimating that he'd been killed late on Friday morning, specifically somewhere between 11 o'clock and 12 o'clock on August the 31st, 2007. This precise time of death, a narrow 60-minute window, would become a pivotal piece of the puzzle, a temporal anchor against which all alibis would be rigorously tested. The autopsy had also yielded another critical piece of information, the recovery of the bullets from Jack's body. Ballistic analysis confirmed that Mr. Range was killed with a .22 caliber pistol. This specific caliber, a common but often underestimated firearm, will become another key descriptor for the murder weapon, guiding the investigative search. But perhaps the most intriguing, and certainly the most unsettling, discovery made by the investigators involved the hidden facets of Jack Rain's own life. The genial, 83-year-old veteran, the community fixture, harbored secrets that contradicted his public image. It appeared that guns, knives, and used cars weren't all that he bought and sold. Jack had another clandestine sideline. He dealt in moonshine. He wasn't a distiller himself, a direct participant in the illicit production of alcohol, but rather he was more of a middleman, much like his other trading ventures. He had lots of moonshine, and he sold it pretty regularly. This revelation was significant. Making or selling unlicensed moonshine was unequivocally illegal in Tennessee at the time. Jack, it seemed, was not above bending the rules, or perhaps outright breaking them, to supplement his income. And that wasn't the only questionable activity that came to light. The investigation revealed another, perhaps more dangerous, aspect of Jack's financial dealings. He did loan money to people. These weren't formal bank loans, but informal transactions, often targeting people that were down and out, individuals in desperate need of quick cash. While ostensibly a charitable act, these loans came with a predatory edge. The interest would add up, often to many times the original loan. One example painted a stark picture of financial exploitation. He may lend somebody $400, and in every pay period he'd take $100. The blunt assessment from the detectives was unequivocal. He was a loan shark. These revelations transformed the understanding of Jack Rains. The amiable, grandfatherly figure now had a darker, more complex undercurrent. The pool of potential suspects broadened considerably, moving beyond disgruntled car buyers to include individuals entangled in the volatile world of illegal moonshine and desperate, high-interest debts. Was it possible that someone who owed Jack money, or one of his moonshine customers, was behind his murder? The answer was chillingly probable. As one investigator remarked, painting a vivid picture of the potential clientele. These were some tough characters. The sheer number of potential motives born from these illicit dealings was daunting. I said, goodness gracious, there's probably 1,000 people out there that weren't going to have done that, and I might want to do it. The investigation, initially mired in uncertainty, now had a multitude of dark avenues to explore. Following up on these newly discovered layers of Jack's life, the investigators circled back to Tina Williamson and her daughter, hoping for any overlooked details. It was during this subsequent conversation that Tina, seemingly remembering a crucial detail amidst her initial grief, offered what sounded like a promising lead. Tina suggested that there was a guy that had a beef with Jack, and that he was the one truly responsible for his murder. She elaborated, claiming they'd been arguing back and forth for 2 or 3 weeks or something like that. This new information immediately raised a logical question. So, why hadn't Tina mentioned it before? Her stepdaughter, offering a sympathetic interpretation, attributed the oversight to profound shock Tina had experienced. I think she was in shock when all this happened, and she had a very hard time just even getting the words out of her mouth. It wasn't like she was trying to hide anything. It may have taken a while for them to get it. This explanation, while plausible in the context of extreme trauma, would later be re-examined with a more critical eye. However, the detectives, ever diligent, pursued this lead without hesitation. They followed up on the tip, contacting neighbors in Jack's vicinity. Their efforts were rewarded when a neighbor did say he'd seen someone fitting the man's description, leaving Jack's house a day or 2 before the murder. The description of the encounter was dramatic. He went storming in the house, and all of a sudden he just ran out. This eyewitness account, however brief and somewhat vague, seemed to lend credence to Tina's belated tip. Had the investigators, thanks to Tina and her daughter, finally caught a break? Was the true killer one of Jack's tough characters, finally within their grasp? The investigation was poised on a precipice, a moment of potential breakthrough. But as is often the case in complex criminal inquiries, the path to truth is rarely straight. A crucial clue, however, was quietly emerging from the depths of technological data. Tina had made calls that were actually pinging off the cell phone tower nearest to the victims. Home, this seemingly innocuous piece of digital information, would prove to be one that leads to a surprising discovery, transforming the entire trajectory of the case. A final, compelling piece of visual evidence would solidify their suspicions, revealing a figure on surveillance cameras. They saw her on the cameras walking down the road. The narrative of the murder was about to take a dramatic and deeply personal turn. By September 6, in the year 2007, 5 days had painfully elapsed since the horrifying discovery made by 39-year-old Tina Williamson. Her friend, 83-year-old Jack Raines, lay dead in his Murfreesboro, Tennessee, home. The details of the crime, as established by forensic analysis, painted a brutal picture. It looked like somebody had just came up behind him and shot him in the back of the head 5 times, a cold, deliberate act that shocked the community. Initial hopes for a swift resolution were buoyed by a tip from Tina herself, pointing towards a specific individual. There was someone that had a dispute with Mr. Raines, she had asserted. A disagreement, she believed, was over money. This lead seemed promising, potentially directing investigators towards one of the tough characters from Jack's illicit dealings. The sheriff's deputies, acting on Tina's information, wasted no time in taking the suspect into custody. Police fully questioned him, subjecting his story to rigorous scrutiny. However, despite the initial promise of the lead, the suspect was able to provide a solid alibi, an airtight account of his whereabouts that placed him far from Murfreesboro at the time of Jack's murder. With objective evidence contradicting Tina's suggestion, the investigators were forced to conclude, with certainty, that there was absolutely no way that he could have committed the crime. With that, their promising lead evaporated, leaving them back at square one, but perhaps with a new, subtle question mark hanging over Tina's reliability. While the man who owed Jack money had proven to be a dead end, the investigators maintained their focus on the possibility that the killer might still be someone who had business dealings with Jack. The web of his financial and social connections was complex, and it was in the spirit of thoroughness that they decided to conduct a little background checking on his good friend and partner, Tina. What they unearthed during this routine inquiry was nothing short of a surprising discovery, one that would fundamentally alter the direction of their investigation. Tina Williamson, the grieving friend, the seemingly devoted companion, possessed a lengthy criminal history. It became evident that she was in trouble with the law quite a bit, a pattern of legal entanglement stretching from about her late teens to her early 30s. While most of the trouble was minor stuff, encompassing such things as shoplifting and bed checks and that kind of thing, a clear pattern of disregard for the law was established. However, some of her past transgressions were far from minor. She did spend 3 years in federal prison for credit card fraud. This was a significant felony-level offense, indicating a calculated propensity for financial deception and a willingness to exploit others. This revelation immediately prompted a critical question in the minds of the investigators. Was it possible that Tina's history of fraud had something to do with Jack's death? The convergence of Tina's past and her present relationship with Jack, particularly their financial partnership, began to coalesce into a disturbing potential motive. Tina and the victim had a business together the way they would buy and sell used cars. Investigators soon discovered the financial arrangements of this venture. That money would go into a special account that Tina had access to. This provided an immediate opportunity for manipulation or theft. Furthermore, this wasn't the only joint account that Jack and Tina shared. They also maintained a $100,000 CD, a substantial sum of money inextricably linking them. The picture that began to emerge was stark. A murdered man, $100,000 on the line, and a business partner with a history of fraud. This combination was more than enough to make the investigators take a closer look at Tina. The pieces of the puzzle, once scattered and seemingly disparate, began to fit into a coherent, if chilling, narrative, as one detective summarized with cold precision. The big thing that pointed towards Tina was money. On September 6th, with mounting suspicions, the investigators formally requested Tina to come in for an interview, ostensibly to discuss her business relationship with Jack. Tina complied, bringing with her a collection of documents. During the interview, she brings in her checkbook and other assorted papers. In this interrogation, Tina reiterated her original account, the one she provided to the investigators on Saturday morning after discovering Jack's body. She maintained that she had last seen Jack on Friday, when he had picked her up for breakfast. She described their morning as rather pleasant, no different than many of the other mornings they spent together. According to her narrative, after breakfast and a few errands, Jack had gone home alone. She stated that he had dropped her off at her home there in Woodbury. Crucially, she insisted that she hadn't been to Murfreesboro until the next evening, when she and her husband found Jack dead at his kitchen table. Her alibi was clear and consistent. She stated that she was in Woodbury the entire time after he dropped her off. But was it the truth? The detectives, ever meticulous, were already looking for inconsistencies. While poring over the paperwork Tina had brought in, a seemingly ordinary item caught an investigator's discerning eye. The title document for a used car. A small, almost imperceptible detail stood out. He notices that there's a spot on it. A moment of intense scrutiny, and then a chilling suspicion solidified. He believes that spot to be blood. While this was far from enough to make an arrest, it was a significant enough anomaly to warrant further investigation. The car title was promptly dispatched off to the crime lab for definitive analysis, a small but potent piece of evidence that hinted at a violent connection. The next step was a direct, assertive move. Armed with a search warrant, the investigators descended upon Tina's house in Woodbury. The search yielded another critical discovery. We executed a search warrant and recovered a Smith & Wesson .22 caliber pistol. The caliber of this weapon was identical to the one used to kill Jack. In addition to the pistol, investigators also found a box of bullets. A quick count revealed a significant detail. 5 shells, the same number that Mr. Raines was killed with, were missing from that box. The implication was stark and unsettling, but suspicion, however strong, requires definitive proof. Did that mean the gun was a murder weapon? To answer this crucial question, the pistol and the box of bullets were also sent to the crime lab for ballistic comparison. The investigators then turned their attention to verifying Tina's alibi, specifically her claim of remaining in Woodbury on the day of the murder. To achieve this, they painstakingly pulled Tina's cell phone records. This modern investigative tool proved invaluable. The cell phone records show that she had made 2 to 3 phone calls on the day that Mr. Raines was killed. By triangulating which towers those calls were routed through, the investigators were able to roughly determine where Tina had been when she made those calls. The results were damning. Tina had made calls that were actually pinging off the cell phone tower nearest to the victims' home. The geographical proximity was undeniable. The cell phone tower was in visible range of Mr. Raines' backyard and off of Twin Oak Drive, which is just 1 street over from my dad's house. This irrefutable digital evidence directly contradicted Tina's steadfast claim that she hadn't been to Murfreesboro on the day of the murder. The conclusion was inescapable. Tina was actually lying about her whereabouts on the day of Mr. Raines' murder. As if catching Tina in a blatant lie wasn't enough, the timing of those 2 particular phone calls proved to be even more incriminating. One was at 11:40 a.m., and another one was somewhere right around noon. These calls fell precisely within the window the medical examiner believed that the murder occurred. The synchronicity was chilling transforming a mere discrepancy into a potent piece of circumstantial evidence linking Tina directly to the scene of the crime at the critical moment. The part of the investigation that really pointed the finger at Tina was the cell phone, conversations, a digital breadcrumb trail that led directly to the victim's doorstep. Still, even with Tina placed in Murfreesboro at the approximate time of the murder, a lingering question persisted, one that momentarily challenged the developing narrative. How did she get home? Tina lived in Woodbury, a considerable distance from Murfreesboro. The distance between the two houses was about 25 miles. Given her documented inability to drive, this presented a significant logistical challenge. The cell phone calls that Tina made, once again, provided a crucial answer. The two calls made around the time of the murder were both directed to a friend of Tina's from Woodbury, a woman named Betty. Once we realized that Tina was calling Betty, we located Betty and spoke with her about that. Betty's account filled in the missing pieces with stark clarity. And why had Tina called Betty on the morning of the murder? She had called because she needed her to come and pick her up. According to Betty, Tina had specifically asked her to give her a ride home from Murfreesboro. The rendezvous point was also critical. Come pick her up on John Bragg Highway near Walmart, which is actually just a walking distance from the victim's house. This direct link, placing Tina within a stone's throw of Jack's home immediately after the estimated time of death, was profoundly damning. Based on this cascade of compelling facts, the detectives wasted no time. They proceeded, then went to Walmart and wanted to see if they could find any evidence. Specifically, they sought to exploit modern surveillance capabilities and pulled the store surveillance. Footage, fortune, or perhaps meticulous planning smiled upon them. They were lucky enough to find a video camera that showed not only the Walmart parking lot, but also showed portions of John Bragg Highway. And there, captured in the grainy black and white images of the security camera, not long after the estimated time that Jack's murder occurred, was the undeniable figure of Tina Williamson. They saw her on the cameras. They saw her walking down the road. This visual confirmation cemented the cell phone data and Betty's testimony into a powerful, irrefutable timeline. Once we realized that Tina was calling Betty for a ride from the victim's house, Tina was a prime suspect at that point. The evidence against Tina, though compelling, was largely circumstantial. We didn't have any witnesses that would actually say they saw this, meaning no one had directly observed her pulling the trigger. Therefore, the investigative team understood their task with crystal clarity, so we had to build the circumstances, meticulously connecting each piece of evidence to form an unassailable narrative. To further bolster their circumstantial case, the investigators re-engaged with Tina's friend, Betty, requesting her cooperation in a more surreptitious manner. They asked if she would agree to place a phone call to Tina Williamson, a phone call that the investigators would covertly get on tape. Betty, understanding the gravity of the situation and the importance of justice, agreed. The recorded conversation began with Betty subtly setting a trap for Tina, mentioning that the police had called her. The cops called me, and they won't set up an appointment to meet me. This was Betty's opening, her way of establishing the premise for her next crucial question: to know what you want me to tell them and what you want me not to tell them. The inquiry was designed to elicit a reaction, a reveal of Tina's true intentions regarding her fabricated alibi. And Tina, either under pressure or caught off guard, immediately fell for it. Her response was swift and telling. The nice thing not to tell them is about that ride. She stressed to her, do not tell the police about that ride. This desperate plea, recorded for posterity, was an unequivocal admission of guilt, a panicked attempt to conceal a truth that could incriminate her. This damning request, revealing Tina's active attempts to subvert the investigation, was a critical turning point. But with a tape recording of Tina asking her friend to lie to the investigators, coupled with the cell phone data, the Walmart footage, and the blood on the car title, be enough to secure a conviction, to put her in jail The police, confident in the strength of their meticulously gathered evidence, decided to take this formidable case to the grand jury. Their presentation was compelling, detailed, and persuasive, and on December 4th, just a mere few hours after they had presented their carefully constructed case to the grand jury, the Rutherford County investigators made the 30-minute drive from Murfreesboro to Woodbury. The quiet suburban afternoon was suddenly shattered by the knock on Tina's door. All of a sudden, they knocked on the door, and they're taking Tina away in handcuffs. The arrest sent shockwaves through Tina's family. My mom was arrested for the death of Jack Raines, and I was just shocked. Honestly, her daughter recounted, grappling with a profound disbelief that their mother, the woman they knew, could be capable of such an act. The stage was now set for a legal battle, one that would expose the dark underbelly of a seemingly innocuous friendship and delve into the true nature of Jack and Tina's relationship. As the community held its breath, the question remained, just what was the true nature of Jack and Tina's relationship? Answering this would require peeling back even more layers of their shared life. On his box of sorts were a mixture of his and Tina's DNA, a shocking revelation that suggested an intimacy far beyond what was publicly acknowledged. And did that intimate connection truly give her motive for murder? The prosecution would argue vehemently that he was going to give everything to Tina. The lines between love, greed, and ultimate betrayal were about to be drawn in sharp, unforgiving relief. On the 27th of January, in the year 2009, the solemn halls of the Rutherford County Circuit Court in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, became the crucible in which the fate of Tina Williamson would be decided. The 40-year-old mother of two stood accused of a heinous crime, the murder of 83-year-old General Jack Raines, a man who, by all accounts, had been a fixture in her life, a surrogate grandfather to her children and stepchildren. The prosecution's case centered on the brutal facts of Jack's demise. He had been shot 5 times in the back of the head, an act of unsparing violence. Tina, through her defense, vehemently declared her innocence. She had nothing to do with this, her family echoed, expressing their shared disbelief. It was just as much of a shock to her as it was to me and my father and my whole family. However, the prosecutor, a seasoned legal professional, entered the trial with a palpable confidence, firmly believing he possessed the evidence required to secure a conviction. I felt that the case was very strong circumstantially, he articulated, acknowledging the absence of a direct eyewitness, but highlighting the power of the accumulated, indirect evidence. Among the most compelling pieces of this circumstantial tapestry were the indelible facts that placed Tina precariously near the scene of the crime at the approximate time the murder occurred. One cornerstone of the prosecution's argument was the precise, irrefutable data gleaned from modern technology. One of them was the pings on the cell phone towers to prove that she was in Murfreesboro and near Jack's house, directly contradicting her initial, staunch alibi of being in Woodbury. These digital breadcrumbs painted a damning picture of her true whereabouts. Further reinforcing this timeline was another crucial piece of visual evidence. And the other piece was a camera from Walmart showed her walking down the road near Jack's home shortly after the estimated time of death. This photographic proof provided incontrovertible evidence of her presence, rendering her earlier denial demonstrably false. The prosecution also presented the testimony of Tina's friend, Betty, who had unwittingly become a crucial witness. Betty confirmed the recorded phone call, recounting how she came to Murfreesboro and picked her up on John Bragg Highway, precisely where Tina was captured on surveillance footage. The investigators had, with shrewd foresight, even gotten Tina on tape, telling her friend to lie to the authorities. This recorded conversation, a desperate plea from Tina to Betty to conceal the incriminating ride, served as a powerful testament to Tina's calculated deception, illustrating her consciousness of guilt. Adding a visceral, tangible element to the case was a small, but highly significant piece of forensic evidence. Among the various financial papers found in Tina's possession, Investigators discovered a title document for a used car that bore a single drop of blood on it. The crime laboratory's analysis confirmed the chilling truth. The crime laboratory determines a blood set of Mr. Jack Raines. This tiny, silent witness irrevocably linked Tina's personal effects to the victim's lifeblood, placing her, or at least something she possessed, at the scene of the crime or in direct contact with Jack's blood. But beyond the how and where, the most perplexing question, the one that resonated with profound human interest, was why? Why would Tina want to murder the 83-year-old Jack Raines, the man her children and stepchildren considered a second grandfather, the man they collectively acknowledged as family, whom her stepdaughter tearfully confessed, "I loved him to death"? According to the prosecutors, the motive was stark, primitive, and tragically common: money. They posited a clear, compelling financial impetus. She had 110,000 reasons to kill General Raines. This sum was meticulously broken down for the jury. 10,000 was the balance of the joint checking account Tina and Jack shared, and the more substantial portion, the 100,000, was a certificate of deposit she tried to cash in soon after his death. The prosecution vividly recounted Tina's brazen attempt to claim these funds. A few days later, after Mr. Raines' body had been discovered, Ms. Williamson comes back into the bank, and she tries to withdraw the $100,000 CD amount. She had shrewdly, or perhaps manipulatively, gotten Jack to put her name on the CD account, positioning herself to inherit the substantial sum. However, her efforts were thwarted by bureaucratic necessity and, eventually, by the unfolding investigation. Because she does not have a death certificate, the bank delays her and she does not get that money. Once she became the prime suspect in Jack's murder, the account was swiftly frozen, sealing off her access to the very wealth she allegedly coveted. The defense, however, sought to reframe this financial maneuver. Was the fact that she'd tried to get her hands on the $100,000 incontrovertible? Proof of murder? After all, it was a joint account. Furthermore, they argued he had said he was going to leave it to her should something happen to him, implying that Tina was merely acting on Jack's stated wishes. But the prosecution painted a more sinister picture, suggesting that this was not merely an act of inheritance, but the culmination of a long-standing scheme. Was conning the elderly man out of his estate Tina's plan all along? This theory gained considerable weight when considering Tina's past. Her history of fraud was extensive and well documented. She was even in jail for approximately 3 years in federal prison for credit card fraud and criminal impersonation, a conviction that revealed a pattern of calculated deception for financial gain. The prosecution then posed a critical question to the jury. When Ron, Tina's husband, introduced her to Jack, did she immediately figure the elderly man was an easy mark? Several members of Jack's family, taking the stand for the prosecution, strongly suggested this was the case. The Raines family felt like Tina had came into Jack's life and just kind of separated him from his family. They recounted how Jack, once a frequent presence at their family gatherings, now gravitated towards Tina and her circle. He would go to family functions with Tina and her family and go to Christmas with Tina. According to the family, Tina's apparent kindness and devotion were not born of genuine affection, but rather an ulterior motive. She was taking advantage of him, they asserted, particularly when it came to the elderly man's finances. They testified to a pattern of manipulation. She had gotten him to change a lot of legal documents and put her name on there instead of family, members that were on there before. This systematic redirection of his assets led to the chilling conclusion that every opportunity that she got, she took advantage of it. Tina had brainwashed him. It appeared that after a lifetime of passing bad checks and engaging in credit card fraud, Tina was, according to prosecution, angling for her biggest payoff ever. The ultimate goal, they argued, was nothing less than his entire estate. It was his intention, according to Tina and others, that he was going to revise his will and give everything to Tina upon his death. But was this simply a matter of Jack looking out for his business partner? A platonic gesture of financial support? Not according to prosecution, who then introduced an even more personal, more intimate dimension to their relationship. Mr. Raines had told several people that Miss Williamson was his girlfriend. The implication was clear. Something may be going on romantically, despite the significant 44-year age difference. Some of Jack's friends corroborated this, testifying that people testified that they had seen affections in public. Jack, they claimed, was very devoted to her, suggesting a relationship that transcended the boundaries of mere friendship and business. Partnership. To substantiate this claim of a deeper, more scandalous intimacy, the crime scene itself offered a potent, if silent, clue. General Raines had been found seated at his kitchen table, wearing only an undershirt and a pair of boxer shorts. When the crime lab meticulously tested those shorts, they made a shocking discovery. On his boxer shorts were a mixture of his semen and Tina's DNA. The forensic experts concluded that would be consistent with Tina Williamson and General Raines engaging in some type of sexual activity, and then General Raines putting on the boxer shorts. This irrefutable scientific evidence suggested, with stark clarity, that they were lovers. The narrative of a devoted daughter and father, or even just close friends, shattered, replaced by the unsettling reality of a secret, intimate relationship. But did this revelation, this shocking evidence of an affair, conclusively mean she killed him? According to the defense, the answer was a resounding no. Their strategy hinged on several key points. First and foremost, challenging the prosecution's physical evidence. They emphatically stated that the prosecution did not have a murder weapon. And while the investigators had indeed found a .22 caliber pistol in Tina's possession, a gun of the same caliber as the one that killed Jack, the defense highlighted a critical forensic limitation. The pistol that was seized from the search warrant could not be positively identified as the weapon without a definitive ballistic match. The prosecution's physical link between Tina and the murder weapon remained a powerful suggestion, but not an absolute certainty. The defense also mounted an argument centered on Tina's physical capabilities, or lack thereof, given her debilitating back injury sustained in the 2004 car accident. The defense argued that she didn't have the physical capability to kill him. They painted a picture of Tina as a feeble person who could not have committed this crime. The act of firing a weapon 5 times, particularly with the precision required for shots to the back of the head, was, they contended, beyond her physical limitations. It would have been difficult for her physically to have fired that weapon in the manner it was. Fired, they insisted, portraying her as too physically compromised to execute such a violent act. This argument, while perhaps a reach for a trained shooter, aimed to cast doubt on her ability to commit such a murder. Even if she had been capable of shooting Jack, the defense asserted, there was no way she would have done it. They argued that it's obvious that Tina felt genuine affection for Jack Raines. This affection, however, was framed within a strictly platonic context by the defense, directly refuting the prosecution's claims of a romantic affair. Just not that kind of affection, they emphasized, attempting to distance Tina from the sexually suggestive DNA evidence. Tina herself staunchly denied the affair, and her defense team offered a seemingly perfectly innocent explanation for the DNA found on Jack's boxers. Her stepdaughter, again testifying on her behalf, offered a domestic justification. One of the reasons my mom's DNA could have been on Jack's shorts was because she cleaned his house, and she did his laundry for him. This explanation, while technically plausible, asked the jury to suspend disbelief regarding the specific nature of the DNA evidence, Jack's semen, mixed with Tina's DNA on his boxer shorts. Crucially, the defense focused on dismantling the prosecution's central motive, money. My mom had no financial motive to kill Jack, her daughter declared. On the contrary, they argued he gave her money, suggesting that Jack alive was far more profitable to Tina than Jack dead. To be sure, at his death, she gained some, but she would have gained much, much more with him living. The defense elaborated on Jack's incredible generosity towards Tina. In addition to the modest profits they derived from buying and selling cars, Jack would regularly help Tina pay her mortgage or make her husband's car payment. Whenever Tina found herself in a financial pinch, which, by the defense's own admission, was probably most of the time, her solution was simple. She would call Jack and get him to make the payment on it. This painted a picture of Jack as a veritable sugar daddy, footing the bill for a lot of that stuff. Therefore, the defense concluded Tina had absolutely no reason that she wanted Mr. Raines dead. Regarding Tina's attempt to cash in on their joint CD after Jack's death, the defense maintained that Tina had simply done what her dead friend would have wanted. Her daughter reiterated, he had told me that he was going to be giving it to her whenever, he passed on. If this was true, the defense argued, why bother killing the 83-year-old when she could just wait out? His death was a natural certainty, and her inheritance, if his intentions were true, was merely a matter of time. The prosecution, however, countered this argument with a psychological perspective on greed. They suggested that perhaps, after 4 years of a financially beneficial but potentially draining relationship, maybe Tina had lost her patience. The prospect of immediate, substantial wealth might have overridden any long-term patience. I think that greed took over, and she decided that she wanted to get the $10,000. She wanted to get the $100,000, and that's the steps she took to get those. The defense, unwavering, dismissed this notion with pragmatic counterargument. She profited more by him being alive than being dead. This stark economic logic was presented as irrefutable. So confident was the defense in their ability to disprove the prosecution's motive that they made a strategic and perhaps risky decision. They rested their case without calling Tina to the stand. Their rationale was that there was nothing she probably could have added to the actual facts in the case, implying that the existing evidence and testimony were sufficient to establish her innocence. Or, as the prosecutors believed, there was another reason Tina was reluctant to testify. Their assessment was shrewd and damning, because we had the tapes of her saying, "Don't tell them about the ride." She would have to take the stand and basically call a large number of witnesses liars. The recorded conversation, a direct plea to Betty to conceal the truth, was an unassailable piece of evidence that would have forced Tina into a direct confrontation with her own deception, a battle she was unlikely to win. Her silence, therefore, was not a sign of confidence, but a strategic retreat in the face of insurmountable truth. Coming up, the question lingered. Did the prosecutors have enough evidence for a conviction, or was their case fatally flawed? The narrative of she killed the golden goose stood in stark contrast to the defense's assertion that she had absolutely no motive based on the proofs that I had seen. The jury, tasked with navigating this labyrinth of competing narratives, would soon deliver its verdict, determining the final chapter in the tragic story of Jack Raines. On the 4th of February, in the year 2009, after weeks of intense testimony, meticulous examination of evidence, and impassioned arguments from both the prosecution and the defense, the air in the Rutherford County Circuit Court crackled with anticipation. The jury, having diligently deliberated, finally announced that it had reached a verdict in Tina Williamson's murder trial. The 40-year-old mother, too, once a vivacious presence in her community, stood accused of a crime that had stripped away the facade of normalcy and exposed a dark undercurrent of betrayal, the killing of 83-year-old General Jack Raines. The case had captivated local attention, drawing a significant number of observers and media representatives. There was a lot of interest in this case, one of the compelling reasons being some suggestion that they were just more than friends. This hint of a scandalous relationship, juxtaposed with the brutal nature of the crime, added a layer of human drama that resonated far beyond the courtroom walls. Regardless of whether the 83-year-old was truly Tina's sugar daddy, a term whispered in the community to describe Jack's profound generosity, there was undeniable proof of their close and mutually beneficial financial relationship. Mr. Raines had been giving her money, had been very, very profitable for her to have a relationship with him. The prosecution's narrative was built on the chilling premise that Tina, far from being a loyal friend or even a devoted lover, had summarily ended this financially rewarding relationship with 5 shots to the back of Jack's head. Their closing arguments painted a clear picture of motive, rooted not in need, but in avarice. Her financial motive wasn't that she needed money. It was that she was greedy and wanted more. The ultimate, brutal metaphor for their argument was stark and memorable. We believe that she killed the golden goose. Conversely, the defense steadfastly challenged this central premise, arguing that Tina had absolutely no motive based on the proofs that I had seen for killing Jack Raines. They contended that to eliminate such a generous benefactor would be an act of profound self-sabotage, an illogical move for someone who benefited so greatly from his continued existence. The defense also meticulously highlighted the perceived weaknesses in the prosecution's physical evidence, particularly the lingering uncertainty surrounding the murder weapon. We did not have a definite murder weapon, they stressed, referring to the absence of a conclusive ballistic match, while the prosecution confirmed that it was a .22 caliber weapon that was used to kill Mr. Raines. They conceded that they could not confirm that that weapon belonged to Tina. This ambiguity, the defense hoped, would be enough to sow reasonable doubt in the minds of the jury. The moment of truth arrived, heavy with the weight of expectation. For Tina's family, the tension was almost unbearable. I was both excited for it to come and, be over with. But I was also dreading it because you never know what's going to happen. Her daughter confessed, encapsulating the raw uncertainty of awaiting such a life-altering decision. It all came down to the reading of the verdict. The foreman stood, the room hushed, and the words that followed reverberated through the courtroom, defining the next chapter of Tina Williamson's life. Tina was found guilty of second-degree murder and felony murder. The news landed like a hammer blow on Tina's family, leaving them utterly shattered. I was just blown away when they said she was guilty. I didn't know what to think. I was just dumbfounded. And I was like, this is real. This actually happened. The reality of the conviction was a profound shock, a betrayal of their unwavering belief in her innocence. Tina herself, however, displayed a remarkable, almost unsettling, composure in the face of the devastating verdict. She reacted stoically. She just showed no real emotion, at least not to the immediate pronouncement of guilt. This calm demeanor, in stark contrast to her family's visible distress, spoke volumes to some observers, hinting at a hardened exterior or a practiced attachment. Her true emotional response, it seemed, was reserved for the sentencing hearing in April. The judge, considering the gravity of the crime and the jury's findings, handed down a severe sentence. Tina received a sentence of life without the possibility of parole. It was then, and perhaps only then, that the full weight of her fate seemed to register. She hung her head, and I believe she was even crying, a rare public display of vulnerability from the woman who had previously maintained such an impassive front. For Jack's family, the outcome, though not bringing back their beloved patriarch, offered a profound sense of closure and, importantly, justice. She'll be there for her lifetime, and so that was good enough for justice for the family. One relative affirmed, acknowledging the finality of the sentence, the brutal nature of the crime, the cold, calculated execution, left little room for clemency in their minds. Anybody that would shoot someone in the back of the head several times has to be somewhat evil, a sentiment that captured the community's revulsion at the violence inflicted upon Jack Raines. Yet, even with a conviction rendered and a sentence imposed. Opinions in both Murfreesboro and Woodbury remain stubbornly divided. The mystery of Jack and Tina's true relationship, whether it was purely paternal or illicitly intimate, continued to fuel speculation. Some people believe that Jack and Tina had a father and daughter relationship, and then others in. The town believed that, there was a little bit more happening there. The ambiguity, the underlying scandal, ensured that their story would persist in local lore. Despite Tina's conviction and the legal finality of the case, her family still maintains her innocence, clinging to the belief that she was somehow caught in a web of unfortunate circumstances. "I think she was at the wrong place at the wrong time," her daughter insisted, offering a narrative of cosmic bad luck rather than deliberate criminality. "I believe she made herself look very bad to the police, but I think it was also that the cops, they just looked at the first person who looked most like a suspect." This argument, common among those who find it impossible to reconcile a loved one with a heinous crime, attempts to shift blame from the individual to the process or to fate. But the rigorous, logical, analytical thinking of the investigative forces, coupled with their unwavering dedication to justice, had systematically dismantled Tina's carefully constructed facade. They had looked beyond the initial appearances, delved into the digital footprint, and pieced together a compelling circumstantial narrative that, in the end, resonated with the jury. The educational value of such a case lies in its profound humanistic meaning. It serves as a stark reminder of the corrosive power of greed, the ease with which deception can flourish under the guise of friendship, and the ultimate, inescapable triumph of truth, however complex and unsettling it may be. It is a story that, while tragic, inspires the enduring belief in the triumph of good over evil, highlighting the meticulous work of those who seek to honor justice and protect the innocent. The pursuit of truth, in all its intricate details, remains a testament to human vigilance and the unwavering commitment to accountability. The crisp, clean air of Murfreesboro, Tennessee, a suburban haven just 40 minutes southeast of the vibrant energy of Nashville, often carries with the quiet hum of ordinary life. It is a place where middle-class dreams find comfortable homes, and where the rhythm of days is typically measured by family gatherings, community events, and the gentle passage of time. Yet, on one particular late summer Saturday, the 1st of September, in the year 2007, this placid harmony was shattered by a discovery that would ripple through the lives of many, exposing hidden truths and challenging the very definitions of friendship and trust. This is a story of a relationship that, on the surface, seemed to blossom from an unlikely bond, only to wither under the harsh light of greed and deception, culminating in an act of profound betrayal. It is a narrative that compels us to look beyond superficial charm, to question the unspoken motives that often lurk beneath the most amiable of veneers, and to appreciate the tireless dedication of those who, against the odds, peel back these layers to reveal the stark, uncomfortable truth. The very essence of Tina Williamson, a woman who would later find herself at the epicenter of a chilling Murfreesboro mystery, was defined by an almost effortless social grace. She was, by all accounts, a natural magnet for human connection, navigating the intricate currents of social interaction not merely with ease, but with an ebullient flair that left a lasting impression on nearly everyone she encountered. Her personality was a vibrant, sprawling canvas, painted with broad strokes of approachability and an undeniable, effervescent charm. She possessed that rare, invaluable gift of instant rapport, a talent that allowed her to bridge the gaps between strangers and transform casual acquaintances into confidants with remarkable speed. Indeed, she was a quintessential, outgoing, talk-your-ear-off kind of person, a description that, while perhaps hinting at a certain volubility, underscored her profound capacity for engagement and her sheer delight in the human exchange. Her conversations were not merely exchanges of information, they were immersive experiences, meandering journeys through anecdotes, opinions, and observations, delivered with a warmth and enthusiasm that could truly captivate an audience, however small. One could imagine her at any gathering, whether a bustling flea market or a quiet community picnic, effortlessly commanding attention, her voice a lively counterpoint to the ambient hum, drawing individuals into her orbit with the promise of genuine connection and a story well told. This innate ability to connect, to charm, to be utterly memorable would become a central thread in the unfolding narrative, a characteristic that initially served her well, but later, under the harsh light of suspicion, would be re-examined through a far more skeptical lens. It was this very quality, this almost magnetic pull, that set the stage for one of the most unexpected and ultimately tragic relationships in the quiet history of Woodbury and Murfreesboro. And with a striking symmetry that fate often orchestrates, the same profound social aptitude, the same innate joy in human interaction, was equally true of General Jack Rains. He, too, was a man whose presence lit up a room, whose spirit seemed perpetually youthful despite the accumulation of 83 years. Jack was always a fun-loving guy, a phrase that conjured images of laughter, conviviality, and an unquenchable thirst for the vibrant pulse of life. He was, quite simply, alive for the party, not merely an attendee, but often its very embodiment, radiating an infectious enthusiasm that drew others into his sphere of joyousness. His sense of humor was a cornerstone of his personality. He liked to joke around. His wit a gentle, playful instrument used to lighten moods and foster camaraderie. Whether exchanging banter with the waitresses at his favorite Waffle House or haggling playfully over a vintage collectible at a flea market, Jack approached life with a twinkle in his eye and a ready smile. His outgoing nature, his genuine enjoyment of company, meant he never knew a stranger for long. Instead, he cultivated a wide network of acquaintances and friends, a testament to his warm disposition and his enduring capacity for human connection. This shared predisposition for social engagement, this mutual delight in the rich tapestry of human interaction, formed the initial, fertile ground upon which his unlikely friendship with Tina Williamson would blossom, setting the stage for a bond that would defy conventional wisdom and ultimately lead to a tragic denouement. The remarkable congruence of their outward personas suggested an immediate, almost inevitable, chemistry, hinting at a connection that, for a time, appeared to be genuinely enriching for both. So when the pair met, perhaps at a bustling flea market where their shared love for human connection and the thrill of good trade might have intertwined, it was almost an instant spark of recognition. Their personalities, so harmoniously aligned in their exuberance, gravitated towards each other with an effortless grace. The natural currents of their outgoing natures flowed together, creating an immediate and undeniable bond, despite the formidable chasm of 40-year difference in their ages, a generational gap that often presents an insurmountable barrier to deep friendship. Tina and Jack found common ground that transcended the mere chronology of their lives. Their shared zest for conversation, their mutual appreciation for humor, and their innate ability to connect on a deeply personal level quickly forged a friendship that ripened into something remarkably close. It was a testament to the idea that true connection often resides not in shared demographics, but in shared spirit. They became confidants, companions, and co-conspirators in the joyful pursuit of life's simple pleasures, building a bridge across the decades with laughter and mutual understanding. This unexpected closeness would soon define a significant portion of their lives, intertwining their destinies in ways neither could have fully anticipated, laying the groundwork for a narrative far more complex than a simple tale of cross-generational camaraderie. Indeed, for many who observed their burgeoning friendship from the outside, the visual impression often conveyed a tender, almost familial relationship. If you saw it together, they might look like daughter and father, a tableau of affection and protection that seemed both natural and heartwarming. There was an undeniable resonance to this perception, a sense of mutual care that mimicked the dynamics of a loving family unit. Jack, in his advanced years. Maya found a renewed sense of purpose and companionship in Tina's youthful energy, while Tina, perhaps, found in Jack a source of stable, benevolent mentorship and unwavering support. This public presentation of familial bond, however innocent it might have appeared, would later become a crucial piece of the psychological puzzle, lending an air of profound betrayal to the tragedy that would unfold. Beyond their personal connection, their shared interests soon propelled them into a more formal arrangement. They also became business partners, a venture that cemented their daily interactions and provided a practical framework for their time. Together, their chosen enterprise was both humble and hands-on. They were selling and buying used cars. This practical endeavor, far from being a mere hobby, provided structure and a common goal, further deepening the intricate threads of their intertwined lives. It allowed them to spend countless hours together, collaborating, negotiating, and sharing in the small triumphs and challenges of their modest trade, reinforcing the public image of a symbiotic, mutually beneficial partnership. However, the seemingly benign tapestry of their friendship and partnership, woven with threads of shared laughter, mutual support, and modest entrepreneurial endeavor, was abruptly and violently unraveled on one September Saturday, a day that began like any other. Their intertwined lives converge upon a catastrophic, irreversible point. Their partnership, once a source of companionship and shared purpose, came to a sudden and tragic end. The victim of this horrifying cessation was Jack Raines himself. He was shot 5 times, a chilling detail that spoke not merely of violence, but of an intent so furious, so absolute, that it defied simple explanation. The sheer number of wounds, particularly their precise placement, suggested a deliberate, almost ritualistic execution, rather than a chaotic struggle. The immediate aftermath of the crime scene suggested a desperate struggle, or perhaps a frantic, aggressive search, a scene of profound violation. Almost every drawer had been opened, things had been thrown around, creating an impression of utter chaos and a violent intrusion that aimed to both disrupt and, perhaps, conceal. This initial, jarring scene immediately presented a stark question to the responding authorities and a shocked community, a query that often forms the bedrock of criminal investigations. Was a robbery gone bad? The visible disarray of the home certainly lent credence to this hypothesis, providing a seemingly straightforward, albeit tragic, explanation for the violence. Yet, even as the possibility of a botched robbery was considered, other, more complex questions began to surface, casting long and unsettling shadows over the seemingly simple explanation. In the quiet corridors of Murfreesboro, where community ties often run deep, a different kind of query emerged, one that delved into the intricacies of personal relationships and hidden histories. Did the old man have enemies? It was a question that seemed incongruous with Jack's jovial, grandfatherly public persona. However, as investigators would soon discover, Jack's life contained a lesser-known facet, a dimension of his character that, while perhaps rooted in a form of generosity, carried inherent risks. He was known to lend them money, offering informal financial